In 2 seconds. Final word is today is October the 27th, 2020. Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the Board of Education, welcome. And thank you for taking the time out of your very busy evening, I'm sure, to visit with us and listen to the board conduct some of its business. This is a special meeting. Again, as I indicated, today is October the 27th. It is about 5:34 now. And we've got a pretty light agenda when you compare it to other board members, board agendas. We're going to cover but some important stuff during this short meeting or short agenda meeting. And most importantly, we're going to talk about the superintendent's plan to organize ourselves into the future. It's called a strategic plan, but more on that later. For now, I have to call the meeting to order, and I've done that. And then I have to say, we invite people to offer up their comments and their concerns to the school board. We set aside the first portion of every meeting because it's in the important part of every meeting so that people can express those concerns. They can do so by literally getting in a Zoom room and talking to us via video, or they can provide written submissions. I'd ask our clerk to describe for people what that process is, because today we don't have any speakers and there have been no written submissions. But as always, the Board of Education encourages people to Zoom in, participate by video, and or provide a written submission. So Madam Clerk, could you describe for folks how they do that?
Certainly. So to any members of the public who are interested in submitting comments or speaking at a business meeting or special meeting, please do so by emailing us at board.of education@rcsdk12.org. And you may also send your comments to that same email address. If you want to send comment, those comments will be forwarded to all the board members and also posted live to our website. If you sign up, please be sure to do that before noon of the day of the meeting.
Thank you very much, Kalia. And again, as always, we thank you and your colleagues for all the prep work that you do in advance of these meetings. People really don't see the kind of work that goes into it, and it helps us be organized, calm, cool, and collected as we go through this sometimes not today, but massive agendas. Again, the agenda doesn't look pretty aggressive today, but it's got a lot of important stuff, and we're going to begin with a presentation of the Superintendent Strategic Management Plan. Superintendent Myers.
Good evening. Thank you, President White. Good evening to you, to Vice President Elliott, to the rest of our commissioners, to our staff and those watching. Dr. Morris, who's the Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, and I will be presenting to you an overview of not only the strategic plan, but the strategic planning process for the Rochester City School District. Next slide. Tonight, our agenda is as follows. We're just going to give you an overview. So just a quick recap of how we arrived at this point. I know that I've shared this with the board previously, but for those who are listening, I just want to make sure that contextually they understand how we arrived at this moment. And then we'll talk a little bit about the strategic plan improvement process. We'll show you pieces of the strategic plan, and you have parts of it as well that we've sent to you for your review. We will take questions, and then the goal is to have final approval by the Board of Education so we can move forward with our plan. Next slide. The strategic planning improvement process, we built it on, or based it on, a model from the Department of Education in Oregon. And you can see there are 5 areas, and it's cyclical. So if you remember way back when we set the direction and the vision, and I talked about those 8 big areas, that we needed to have a focus on, and they were finances, academics, trauma-informed practices, special education, restorative practices, multilingual learners. And so that really was contextually the basis for the development of the plan. Then we moved forward and we looked at several data points. We know that we have schools in receivership. We know that we have schools that are CSI, comprehensive and targeted support. And we also have schools in good standing. We looked at mostly quantitative data, but some qualitative data. We've heard some from individuals. They've reached out or we've had meetings. And so that provided good opportunity to assess what we needed to have happen in the Rochester City School District, not only at the school level, at the department level, and at the district-wide level. And so we went about creating the strategic plan. And just again, a recap of that process, we began in July with a group of about 25 stakeholders, both internally and externally. We had teachers and support staff, we had administrators, we had parents and caregivers, and we were very fortunate to have 2 students who were very active in the process. We had a set of 4 meetings where we met, and we were able to coalesce around creating a mission, a vision, core beliefs, performance targets, and priorities. And Dr. Morris will go a little more in depth into those, and that's when we'll get into the process. Right now, we're at the stage where we need to begin implementation of the strategic plan. And that will be a very targeted, strategic, and focused process that with the goal of actualizing the targets that we have set for ourselves. I think the key piece of strategic planning, however, is the monitoring and the adjustment process. So we have these plans, but just a reminder, they will remain fluid, because as we move forward and as the task forces, which Dr. Morris will explain in detail in just a little bit, as we move forward, some things we might need to change our approaches, or we might, as we do more digging into the data and understand how we approach graduation or 3 through 8 testing or having restorative schools, that we might need to make some adjustments or tweaks to the plan. And then we'll assess that, and then we'll see what happens at the end of the year. The goal is to obviously have improvement and to make things better. And then we'll embark on the journey again during the 21-22 school year. Next slide. So again, just for those who, this is a new slide for them, with that process that we embarked in over the summer, we are proposing to the Board of Education a mission and vision. And just to reiterate, the Board of Education last year worked and developed a mission and vision for the district. And so this mission and vision takes that and makes it just a little more succinct. And then we we moved the vision up to the mission and the mission down to the vision to align the work. And then what was so powerful was to coalesce around these core beliefs. And you can see, while they're not prioritized, the very first one is prioritized. And I feel it's important to share that we unequivocally, unanimously, very quickly agreed on the fact of that first priority, that students are our first priority and will drive each decision. And we really felt very strongly about that as a team, as a group. And I know that President White, Vice President Elliott, and the rest of our commissioners feel this way. And so our focus is really to make sure that we ensure that all students have equitable access to a high quality education. And we want to graduate each student in the Rochester City School District as a productive member of society. Next slide. Dr. Morris.
Thank you, Superintendent. So what we did as part of our initial approach to the strategic planning process was work to assess the need for the strategic plan and where we would need to direct our focus in terms of supporting our core values, our mission, and our vision. And so we went through a very systematic process to review data. And as the superintendent has said, we reviewed lots of different types of data. So there were demographic data that we looked at. there were perception data that we looked at, there were programs and process data, and we also took a very deep look at student achievement data, looking at our state performance on required assessments and our performance in terms of graduation expectations and realizations in diplomas granted. And so by doing this deep data dive, what that allowed us to do is determine our priorities and the goals that it would emerge based on the needs that we had, that the data told us that we had, and where our strengths were. And so we wanted to make sure that that review was in depth, that it provided us all of the information that we needed in order to make informed decisions for the district and moving forward. So one of the areas that we started to review were areas that related to grades 3 through 8, ELA and math. And I'm presenting right now a chart that spans over 18 years in terms of the performance, indicating with bars along the trajectory where major events occurred impacting the measurement of the exams along the way. So for example, between 2001 and 2002, the tests were only given in the required grade levels of 4 through 8 from the requirement from ESSA, which is at the federal level for testing. We made sure that we looked at and we analyzed all of the data points that related to ELA and math performance. And therefore, we could use this to make recommendations of strategies and objectives for focus in these areas and make sure that we could improve on the identified challenge areas. So the academic data was important to longitudinally unpack. The data, since these tests were aligned to the Common Core Learning Standards, which you can see occurred between 11-12 and 12-13, have resulted in performance on the test where 80% of our students or more have not achieved proficiency. So prior to the untimed tests in 17-18, more than 90% of the students did not meet standards for proficiency. Comparably, the achievement gap has remained notable between Black and Hispanic students with their white peers, measuring roughly 1 to 2 years schooling of gaps in learning. What was the focus of our analysis was the overall performance and achievement of students on these tests in the district, as well as other data points. So of course, unpacking this data, you see immediately that there are overall performance gaps that we want to make sure that we address in the strategic plan, but also what emerges is a significant achievement gap. And these gaps are even more stark when analyzed for the achievement gap between schools, which is related to the concentration of students that are predominantly Black and Brown and concentrated in schools, or within schools, which is related to whether a student is part of that demographic group that is part of the achievement gap. So COVID-19 is still remaining a barrier to our ability to provide in-person instruction, but the in-person instruction is a factor as well that we wanted to take into account with the strategic planning. So assuming that full in-person instruction does not resume until next year at some point, the global consulting firm McKinsey & Company estimates that students may fall behind nearly 7 months on average. For white students, the average is 6 months. In comparison, Hispanic students would be set back more than 9 months, Black students would be set back more than 10 months, and low-income students over a year. So overall, existing racial and socioeconomic achievement gaps could expand by up to 15 to 20%, the group estimates. The reason why we bring this up is that we are sharing the concern that students who may have suffered the greatest loss in the spring may never catch up if we don't do something specific and targeted to address this concern. And therefore, This is informing our approach, where we want to narrow the gap with a strategic plan and its specific accuracy in terms of pinpointing specific areas of need. And this will allow us to make key decisions about allocating resources such as curriculum, instructional approaches, technology, updated textbooks, and qualified teachers. Our analysis also went in the line of looking at our students who are concluding in our K-12 continuum. And so looking at our potential graduates and students who actually graduate from our CSD. So we looked at that as well. And I wanted, before I started to talk about the graduation rate.
Dr. Morris?
Yes?
I'm not sure if you know that your video is off. Just letting you know for the stream.
I do know that the video for me is off because I wanted to make sure that I was able to see my presentation and present it.
Oh, okay.
I'll put my video back on when I'm done with the presentation, but thank you.
Thank you.
So in terms of the graduation rate and how the graduation rate is presented, when we were doing analyses, we had to look at very specific pieces of the graduation rate and its analyses. So I just wanted to quickly go over that so that you would relate to the example that I'm going to give about the operationalizing of the strategic plan shortly. So we looked at not just the overall metric of the graduation rate, but what ties into the graduation rate. In other words, how many students were in the cohort? And a cohort is a group of students who first enter grade 9 together in the same school year, minus those who transfer out, emigrate, or die during the 4 years of calculation, or 5 or 6, depending on if you're doing the calculation from the ESA angle. But we also looked at how many of those students that were in that group graduated. And of the 2015 cohort, there were 1,315. But of that student group, 2,086, 410 were still enrolled. We had a very small number who transferred to an official GED program, but we also had a significant number that dropped out. So all of those components between graduating, still remaining enrolled, and still requiring our assistance to help them to completion, and also those students who did not complete and are considered to be dropped out, were all major areas that we wanted to ensure that we addressed in our strategic plan planning. So I just wanted to at least provide you all the difference in the nuances between graduation and dropout rates and how that all calculates out, because that was a key part of our analyses that we did as a strategic plan operating committee. So we use that information to analyze our longitudinal historical performance on graduation rate. So once again, we use this to analyze and reflect and determine what are the areas we would like to identify for improvement, and what are the areas that are highlighted as areas of success and areas of change. So while the district's overall high school graduation rate has increased by 15.5 percentage points between 2013 and 2019, a major attribution of this increase was the result of greater use of local diplomas. That's an important data point for us to consider in the development and the analysis of a strategic plan approach. The reason why is because those diplomas are typically given to students who cannot pass exams. So, and then when you look at who's earning the local diplomas, these earned numbers are stark for our minority and low-income students. And this is highlighting for us areas of achievement and opportunity gaps that our students, all of our students have to work through, but then particularly our Black, Brown, multilingual, and students with disabilities. Another area that was highlighted in this analysis was the difference in the achievement of students earning a diploma with an advanced designation. So, for example, if you look at the data further, you can see that in 2009, where you see this one bar, which I highlighted here, which says Race to the Top application, aspirational goal of 95% graduation rate. Back at cohort 2009, the district granted 81 local diplomas. 58% of those were earned by Black students and 26% were earned by Hispanic students. By the time we get to the end, which is cohort 2015, there were 233 local diplomas granted, which with 61% earned by Black students and 29% earned by Hispanic students. And 90% of the local diplomas that were granted were either granted to Black or Hispanic students. In comparison, when you're looking at this data further and examining regions with advanced diplomas, you will see that in 2009, which is where we have the Race to the Top application of the aspirational goal, we granted 135 advanced diplomas, and we give those to our students in the cohort 2009. And 41% were earned by Black students, 18% were earned by Hispanic students. But by the time we got to cohort 2015, there were 114 advanced diplomas granted, with 33% earned by Black students and 17% earned by Hispanic students, with a total of advanced diplomas being earned by Black or Hispanic students as being a total of 42%. This highlights an increasing achievement gap in terms of the types of diplomas Black and brown children earn as they progress to college, careers, and life in comparison to their peers. While you can look at local diplomas as a safety net for students who otherwise struggle on these exams, this disproportionate reliance on local diplomas and corresponding decreases in diplomas earned in advanced diplomas in rigorous curricular areas of historically underserved groups of students have signified problems with instructional rigor, inadequate support, and lack of equitable access to challenging work of materials. And this formed a basis for our priorities that I will now describe that are identified under the strategic plan. So the priorities that we identified in the strategic plan centered around 4 major areas. As the superintendent has described, we did a review of our data. We looked at lots of different data points. We took a hard look at our examination and our performance as our commencement students, and we emerged with 4 main areas. One is relating to academics. The next one is relating to having an inclusive, caring, and safe learning environment for our students and our staff, building linkages that are strong with our community, and lastly, fostering dynamic leadership. So what I wanted to do is take everyone through just operationalizing one of the priorities, not going to take you through all of the priorities, and just show you what it looks like when you look at how it is operationalized for districts, for the departments, for the schools and programs and students. So just looking at it from a higher level, I'm just going to take us through identification of a particular emergent action step that we would want to do that specifically targets the academic program of our district to help support our students. So if we're focusing on priority number 1, looking to implement student-centered learning that decreases our achievement gap, as I've described, we can develop an example action, which could be partnering with the community and businesses to stimulate the creation of multiple career pathways and STEM offerings at each high school to ensure career-ready graduates. As I've already described, this is an important aspect of implementation of the plan, because we not only want to give a diploma to our students, we want one that's going to give them the opportunity to access career and pathways beyond K-12 that allow them to be successful. So there are many different additional plans that are in existence right now, and we, by using the strategic plan approach, will be able to align these aims and objectives that are expressed in these additional plans, such as the DSIP, such as receivership plans, such as the SEPs that are created at the schools and the programs. So what I've presented to you on this slide are different examples of what this looks like, depending on which level you're operationalizing the strategic plan. So developing and encouraging partnerships could be something that's district-led. Departments could work on developing and implementing rigorous vertical curricula for our schools to use to implement new career pathways, courses, and STEM offerings, and making sure that we are in alignment with the expectations of the accountability system. And lastly, an example of how this could be implemented in a school is that each one of the schools would then implement the provided curriculum that we give them, and that we would allow for increased partnerships at the school level to support students as well. And these are measured through very, very discrete targets. So the targets will be monitored based on ongoing two-way feedback loops from the schools that are being provided to the district and for the associated task forces, which I will talk about shortly. Also, this two-way feedback loop also is informed by communication with the community, with communication with the board, and with state education department. This is all aligned and umbrellaed, if that's a verb, under a strategic plan approach. So here are some of the ways that we would plan to measure that initiative, if that's one that we implemented as part of this plan. There are the 4 areas that are related to secondary outcomes, as I've described, about graduation rate and how many students are on track and whether they're achieving those rigorous outcomes that we know are necessary for students to leave our schools and become successful in college, career, and beyond, and also to decrease the amount of students who do not complete with us, but also will complete and not be considered to be a dropout. So those are some of the metrics that we believe will be driven by the connection by the strategic plan. So how will we measure and how will we get started? Well, some of the ways that we will do is that we will form our task forces upon completion of this process tonight, and hopefully by getting the approval of the board for our direction. We will make sure that all our department in our schools are aligned with the strategic plan, and we described that that is an ongoing progress. We want to provide and develop a dashboard and a website of strategic plan goals and progress, some of which would be public facing, so that we can keep the community, the board, and the state education department and other interested parties informed of our progress through the strategic plan. Internally, we would establish online transparent collaboration sites for our teachers so that they can also support strategic plans. We will also make sure that the dashboards for our schools are supporting the strategic plan direction and action steps that we have discussed. And we would make sure that all of our curricular approaches and assessment and instructional strategies, as well as other approaches that we're doing to increase the rigor of our curriculum, are shared and they are developed in a common format or method. And lastly, I wanted to just mention that we have established, as part of our strategic plan approach, an opportunity for collaboration with not just internal in-district collaborators, but also to allow for that multifunctional, multi-disciplined, multi-area collaboration that comes by having multiple stakeholders in the room and involved with the work. So what we would have is a strategic plan that will be assigned one of the plan's proposed strategic goals and objectives from the strategic directives. And from this, we will populate a reporting worksheet. And so by this worksheet that we're going to have, we're going to hope that it will encourage task forces to engage in lateral thinking across the district and from across the community and across the stakeholders, rather than having traditional vertical silos. And so some of the task forces will probably have subcommittees because their breadth and their purview is very large, but it will allow those subcommittees to focus on key aspects of the plan. They will be advisory. A lot of the work will be led by RCSD staff and will be led by the direct members who are responsible for implementation or action. But these task forces are really important because they will allow for us to collect information and perspectives that we may not necessarily consider because we are including a diverse group at the table. So this will, each task force will have an RCSD co-chair. So there's multiple chairs in charge of each one of the task force directions. And we intend to include members from across the district, including faculty and students and other key stakeholders, as I've mentioned. It's very important because they will help us take this emerging plan to the next level. They will help discuss and refine key activities that will need to occur during the next 3 years for the district to successfully execute its plan's goals and to effectively move towards the aspirations that we've set within the plan. So that was a high-level view of our strategic plan, and we welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, I have the participant screen up. Vice President Elliott. Vice President Elliott.
You're muted, Vice President Elliott. We can't hear you. Can't hear you. Mm-mm.
Vice President Elliott, you may have to log off and log back in, and then it'll ask you if you want to auto connect with your speaker. And sometimes when you don't click that, it doesn't connect.
All right, well, she figures that out. I don't see anybody else having questions. Anybody else?
And I do, but you want me to raise my hand officially?
Yeah, well, yeah, it just makes it easy to keep order. Go ahead, Commissioner Brown.
I just wanted some clarification when Dr. Morris was talking about the graduation rates and the local diplomas. So what I got from that is that our graduation rates have been increasing, but if we really break down that graduation rate even further, we have really increased local diplomas versus those of the other type that students can obtain. But is that what you were referencing? I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. So the graduation rate really is just also an increase in local diplomas. I know at one point the state had kind of went away or said they were going to not allow local diplomas. I remember people were advocating to keep local diplomas. So part of the strategic plan is to kind of go away from that path, I guess, for students to increase our graduation rates and make sure that they're getting the one where they're passing their exams.
So thank you for the question. And analysis of the exam and the diplomas granted over the past 3 years have shown at least a quarter of our diplomas that we've granted over the past 3 years have been local diplomas, where local diplomas are not bad in of themselves. There's nothing wrong with a student earning a local diploma, and it counts for graduation rate calculations and such. What it is a signifier of is that students are struggling with the exams. So as we've discussed, there are varying levels of access when it comes to curriculum resources and textbooks and such. And we want to make sure that we are strengthening our curriculum resources. We are strengthening the programs that our students are receiving so they don't have to rely on a local diploma to graduate, that they are successful on the exams, and that they are able to pursue even more rigorous diplomas if that's what they would like to have to complete in our district. So it's not that we want to eliminate that as a pathway. We would never do that. We want to make sure that for those students who want to pursue an advanced diploma, for those students who want to pursue a Regents diploma or one with more endorsements or credentials, that they have that option because we're providing that rigorous curriculum and that rigorous opportunity for them to do so.
And I just wanted to piggyback on that. If you remember, one of our performance targets is to increase college, career, and civic readiness. And so the type of diploma you get, the higher level of diploma you get, the more points that you earn. And that's a metric that we are looking at. So if you, like we spoke last time we met about the seal of biliteracy, that's at the very top. Getting an IB diploma is at the top. Taking advanced placement courses or dual credit or concurrent credit courses are at the top. But when you go down, and local diplomas are at the bottom. So it's just we also are looking at that metric to increase the opportunities for students to earn a higher level diploma, as Dr. Morris said.
And then I just also want to mention, and I have the document, and I was telling Dr. Myers-Small that I was very impressed with the document that I received on Friday, because you guys have been here a very short amount of time in comparison to other folks. And this is probably the most comprehensive strategic plan I've ever laid eyes on for this district. And so I was very impressed with it. I do want to point out, and I'm sure it's somewhere in here, but it was not presented, that one of the goals for me personally is also to ensure that bilingual and ELL students, that department is not just stabilized, but that those students have the resources that they need. And I do know statistically, if we did a focus on those students, that would help the district overall in a number of areas that we're being measured at by the state. So just want to make sure that that's in there. But I know one of the things I did appreciate about the strategic plan right away is the language used, that this is an ongoing strategic plan, that it will be edited and evaluated periodically, but also has room for growth and change. So it's not just set in stone. And I really appreciated that, because we don't know what's to come for next year and the year after that and so forth. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I see Vice President Elliott got back on, so I'll take her first, and then Commissioner Powell, go next. Vice President Elliott.
Still can't hear you. Oh. Can you call one of us and we'll translate what your question is, or text?
Or you can do it through chat.
Text message. Is the chat on?
I don't think your chat is on.
Can she call into the Zoom?
Calling in is the best option, I think, Vice President Elliott. The chat option isn't on.
While she figures that out, Commissioner Powell, you want to go ahead?
Sure, thank you. I have 3 observations. Starting with your slide on the core beliefs. It's fascinating that you share this today, because today was the first day of the NYSBA convention online. And one of the featured presentations was called Reaching Equity Through Practitioner Belief Systems. And the presentation was from the Gates Chi School District. And I'm looking forward to reviewing the recorded session and putting it side by side against the core beliefs that was on that slide, to see how well the concepts merge. But frankly, it was such a great presentation. It was so on point that you'd think we would do this better than anybody, because we already have such diversity. But I would love to have the Gates Chi people presented just to us here in Rochester if they were willing to do it. Because although the session was taped, it's only available till the end of the year. And I think it's only available to those who had paid the registration fee. So I'm not sure if there's a way I could share it with the rest of my colleagues and the administration. But that's the first point. The second observation was the timeline that was shown. It was very instructive to see where you had put the hacks, where the standards from the state had changed, because without those, it just looks like a random wandering path. But when you put in the hacks, you can see how the change from one year to the next, based on any given set of standards of the day, whether it be ELA and math only at the 4th and 8th grades, or the race to the top, you could see that there were incremental changes within those standard groups. And the most recent being the most, all over the cliff problems, because it created such a huge change from what we had been doing, how we've been doing business before. My last observation is a question. We do have a dashboard that tracks school performance, yes? And so when you have a slide that said develop a dashboard that's outward facing as well as, and has some metrics that we can see only internal. I mean, that started well over a year ago, did it not? Back when your predecessor was here? The dashboard work?
I'm not sure when it started,
It
Commissioner
actually
Powell.
started when Barbara was here, I think.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, before Terry. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
going to ask Glenn to respond to that, because we just had this conversation. What, about 2 weeks ago, Glenn?
Yes, we did. So the dashboard back when Barbara Dean Williams was the superintendent, or the proposed dashboard, was supposed to be a forward-facing dashboard that the community and stakeholders could take a look at. Of course, we have our internal dashboard, which is SPA, which we have just upgraded to Rock 3D. The external dashboard on September 24th, in a meeting in the superintendent's conference room at that time, we were told to put that dashboard on hold, anything forward facing at that time. And since that time, we have done no further development with that dashboard.
September of what year? Last year?
Correct, yes.
Well, I know there were some data points that had generated a lot of concern about whether they should be inward facing or outward facing. And I don't know, it seems to me a little bit of a tempest in a teapot, because, if the data is defensible, reputable, then it is what it is, But anyway, my point is that we already have a significant amount of that infrastructure figured out. So although you have it as a task to be completed, developing that dashboard is pretty nearly complete, wouldn't you say?
So I just want to jump in and clarify one thing before you respond, Glenn. What I'm saying is that if you look at the strategic plans that are presented by districts across the country, they have a way that they can present progress and measurement of approach to achieving or exceeding goals on their websites. It's a public access area that people in the community, as well as the district community, can access these progress metrics and determine progress towards achieving or exceeding the goals. That's what I mean by dashboard. So it's not that tool that Glenn is describing, or that you guys may have been familiar with in the past. This is more of a place that if you wanted to know what is our strategic plan as Rochester City School District, you could come to this page. You would be able to see our strategic plan and our direction. You would see what we're measuring ourselves against. You could see some of the things that we're doing to achieve our goals. And also you would be able to see measured in the ways that are appropriate, incremental progress towards meeting or exceeding our goals. So I believe it's different than what Glenn is describing. Ours will be, however, more analogous to what is being done in other districts to present this type of progress.
You all set, Commissioner Powell? Okay, Vice President Elliott, got you on?
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
You know, I actually have a new online wireless router that I just installed and a new modem. So I thought that would take care of the problem. So I'm going to have to figure out what's going on. But in any event, I want to thank Dr. Myers-Small and Dr. Mars for the presentation and the strategic plan. I don't know, this thing is saying on the screen on my laptop, unmute myself. I don't need to do that, do I?
You're fine. You're fine.
Okay. So my question was, I think it was answered, but I wasn't sure. And either the superintendent or the deputy superintendent could respond to this. How long is this planned for? Is it 3 years, or is it sort of in perpetuity where we're going to make adjustments to it, or what's the end date of it, and you know, what are our goals that we're expecting as a result of to have accomplished by this strategic plan?
So it is 3 years.
Okay.
But we are again monitoring and adjusting at the end of each year to look at that. But it's a 3-year plan.
Okay. And then the longitudinal and historical data that Dr. Morris presented, particularly around that time with the Race to the Top application and the change in the cut scores. My response to that from the community is that every time we seem to be improving and able to, you know, reach some kind of equity, they always change the game. And so my question becomes is that if we're able to get out of this situation that we're in now in terms of low test scores and low graduation rates, and we're moving back up, is there a way to prevent the kind of state or federal changes that may cause us to regress? Because this really is a regression for our school district, when in fact, when you look at the 2008, 2009, we were soaring, we were getting there, and there was hope. But then when you get new changes, and we want to tend to blame ourselves and our students, when in fact it wasn't us, we were moving in that direction, but we got these changes from the state and federal government. How do we counteract that, Dr. Myers-Small?
So I'll start, and then Dr. Morris, you can certainly chime in. Part of this is the state, it was looking at last year or at the beginning of 2020 about changing graduation requirements and how we actually assess what graduation looks like, right? And because we've had such an over-reliance just solely on getting that 65 or higher on the Regents exams or the Common Core. And so one of the things that we've been I just had conversations over the weekend is really trying to figure out what a better portrait of a graduate and what academic success looks like in Rochester. And, you know, we have School Without Walls, which has some alternative components to it, some portfolio work and things of that nature. But that's something, and I just had this conversation with Dr. Jallo as far as, you know, how do we still maintain the integrity, the high expectations, because think sometimes when people say that you take the tests away or things of that nature, that you don't have that rigor, you can still have that rigor. And so that's something that, you know, my goal is, once things calm down a little bit with COVID, I really want to get out and start the advocacy around that. And when I was at the state education department, I was actually looking at different models, not only nationally, but internationally, of how they assess achievement and success. And so that's something that I think we really need to take a look at, because it just solely is not that proficiency of how you do on a 3 through 8. And, you know, that's what a big part of the opt-out movement was around, that we were just determining student success on an ELA exam, state assessment, a math, or the Regents exam score. So that's something that it's my hope that we can really look more deeply at. I don't know if you had anything to add to that, Dr. Morris.
Yes, so thank you. I just want to mention that one of the reasons why I plotted not just the Rochester performance longitudinally, but also included the state longitudinal data as well, is to show you the movement of the performance of the data over time in response to those levers. So when there was the race to the top change, what impact did that have, not just here, but also across the state? So you saw this was an overall impact of the performance of all districts. But to answer your question long term, I think one of the things that's happening is by focusing through the strategic plan and by using this data as an opportunity to focus in on what we should do to support our students and our schools and the district to improvement and beyond, it's allowing us to analyze things such as our curriculum and making sure that we are providing a rigorous, accessible, current curriculum to our students that is reflective of the students that we have, and that we can impress upon our teachers to use diverse instructional approaches that allow them to access our students and their needs, and allowing us to target specific implementations relating to technology and the materials that we give our students. And I think by having all of that and complementing that with our qualified teachers and our qualified administrators and making sure that we're all coalesced around the same goals, I think that we can then provide a sustainable direction forward and upwards. And so that's really part of this. It's not just to do a long-term look back without seeing that it's impressing and evolving and informing the direction forward. And you will see, once you are able to look at the academic plan that will be provided by the state monitor, that it's really complementary, that the direction that we are looking to move the district in is complementary, and it's moving us all towards that sustained progress forward and upward. And we don't want to regress. We don't want to move forward. We want to make sure that this is a world-class district that is serving the needs of all of our kids here.
Thank you. And I just have one last comment to make with regard to the local diplomas and the impact that has had on our graduation rate. I know that County Legislator John Lightfoot, who presented to the Community Intergovernmental Relations Committee when I chaired that, was a proponent, and so am I, in terms of the local diploma. I think he indicated that he got a local diploma and I got a local diploma. It doesn't mean that you stop learning at the point of graduation, whether you have an advanced diploma or you have a local diploma. What it does mean is that there has been some you've reached a milestone, if you will, whether you can pass those exams or not. And so I just want to convey my support of local diplomas. Now, I do understand, Dr. Morris, what you were saying about that, you know, we don't want those diplomas to be disproportionate awarded to Black and Brown students. We certainly don't want that, but it certainly is an opportunity for folk who can, after they graduate, and that's what they tell us in the PhD program, you don't pay your money to learn, you do the work, and then after you get out, you learn, you know, you teach yourself. And so I just wanted to lend support of your conversation about the local diploma, but that it is, and I would support County Legislator John Lightfoot and myself in saying we got one, and we're not doing too bad. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice President Elliott. Commissioner LeBron, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so thank you, Vice President Elliott, as well, for mentioning that, because I did have a follow-up, because I don't want people to be confused about what a local diploma is. And I know that people sometimes equate them just to special education students. And so I just wanted Dr. Morris, if you could, just explain a little bit for those listening in to the community who's eligible for a local diploma, and how that is a little bit different from the traditional Regents diploma. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And so we do grant as a district Regis examinations that can either have various endorsements or credentials, but the local diploma option is a viable and approved option for our students. Any student who meets the eligibility to earn the diploma can earn a local diploma. So this is not now specific just for students with disabilities. And a gen ed student can earn a local diploma because we have an appeal option for the examinations that are available for our students. So if a student is able to appeal to of the exams that they're not successful on that are needed for graduation, they can then, as long as they've passed the other Regis examinations that are required for graduation and have accumulated the correct number of credits that are required for graduation, they can graduate with a local diploma. So that is an option, and is a viable option for our students. Additionally, that appeal option is also granted to students who are English language learners. So this is also an appeal option that allows them to earn a diploma as a local diploma if they're an English language learner as well. So it's not just now a diploma option that is isolated just for students with disabilities. It is one that is available to all students, and as long as they meet the requirements in terms of the appeals and meeting those appeal options, they can earn a local diploma.
Vice President, Commissioner Powell.
Last question for me is, since we're going to be asked to approve this either tonight or at our next business meeting, my question is for Dr. Jallo. Did you sit in on the development of this strategic plan?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. And you're endorsing this?
Yes, I am.
Okay, that's all I want to know.
I just wanted to follow up to that. Not only did she was part of the group that developed it. So she was involved over the summer from start to finish. And then as all of the things that Dr. Morris has been outlining, she's been either involved with or she's been kept in the loop.
Okay, hold on one second. Trying to get my video together here. It doesn't want to cooperate. Can you guys see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I have a couple questions. First, a couple comments. Thank you, first of all, Dr. Morris and Dr. Myers for this presentation. It has detail, it has data, and most importantly, it's forward thinking, which is really critical for this district. We haven't had one in some time, not because prior superintendents hadn't prepared them, but there was some controversy about them. But we appreciate you allowing us to get up to date on our strategic plan. And by the way, Commissioner Powell, the plan is, unless Dr. Myers corrects me, to vote on this tonight.
Yes.
Yep, so we will do that. Dr. Morris, thank you for clarifying the issue on local diplomas. Sometimes when people say local diplomas, they think you don't have to take any Regents exams. Well, first of all, I want to make clear to everybody, Regents exams are now required in New York State. They're not an option. That's the standard rule. Prior to 2006, you did not have to have a Regents exam.
Well, you needed to do Regents competency, RCTs, you could do.
But they weren't Regents exams.
Correct.
Totally different. Right. And in fact, as Vice President Elliott says, she graduated without one. Former county legislator Lightfoot graduated without one, and yours truly took one Readiness exam at Brighton High School. I failed it, and I still graduated. So I appreciate everybody making the comment that just because you don't have a Readiness exam, and that happens to some of us, doesn't mean that you're not competent, capable, and of positive things in the future. But all that changed in 2006. And that year, just by way of history, New York State required that every year after 2006, you had to increase the number, the cohorts had to increase the number of Readiness exams that they had to pass. So in 2006, I think it was 2007, that cohort had to pass one Readiness exam to graduate. And 2007, that cohort had to pass two. And every year it went up. I think it capped out in 2011 where it stayed at 5. And that's where I think Dr. Morse talks about, well, you know, you can get a local diploma if you don't get the cut score, the right score, but you can still graduate because you can appeal it. But those students are even taking Readiness exams that, for example, I didn't have to take. Another thing that I wanted to note is that there is some issue about the number of local diplomas that has increased, I think Dr. Morris said, in the last 3 years. Well, what's interesting about that is, you know, we use the word levers. That's a great word to use in terms of the state does things that affect what we do, sometimes negatively, sometimes positively. The example was given of the changes in the cut scores. That was a lever that the state had pulled. And Vice President Elliott, to your point, they not only changed the rules of the game, but those of you around at that time, they changed them mid-year. The kids had already taken those tests, and the state, for whatever reason, decided after they had taken the test that they were going to change the cut score. It was really kind of a draconian thing to do, but they did it, and that's an example of a lever. Well, there's a lever that was pulled here. Some would say to, not necessarily to our disadvantage, but it was a lever that the state was very clear. Dr. Morris said about 3 years ago, you could see the number of, we're just going to lob them in as local diplomas went up. Well, you know what the lever was that was pulled? The lever was that in 2016, the New York State Board of Regents introduced the 4+1. They told us to start giving students an opportunity because students were struggling with global Readiness exam. You all remember that? Our students were having a tough time with the global Readiness exam. So New York State said in 2016, about 3 years ago, we're going to give you an alternative pathway so that these kids who are struggling with this 5th Readiness exam can have a way to graduate. And the irony here, this whole conversation is we are concerned, and Dr. Morse and others are rightly concerned, that there may be a disproportionate number of students who are getting these alternative pathways. But the irony here is in 2016, when they introduced the 4+1, if you look at the literature and the justification behind it, it was that they wanted to make sure that students of color weren't being prevented from graduating. So here we are about 3 years, 4 years later saying, wait a second, and I get it, you're right. We don't want to make sure that this isn't, you know, people of color just giving an easier path to graduate just because they're people of color. But the irony was in 2016, about 3 years ago, they introduced the 4+1 because they were concerned that children of color weren't graduating. Now, which one is right? I'm not here to debate and argue tonight, but I want y'all to know that if we increase the number of students of color or students in general that were getting these 4+1 diplomas, it was because the state had pulled the lever exactly 3 years ago and said, give more of your students an option to graduate. But there was another lever that was pulled. In 2018, Dr. Aquino came in and was unequivocal. He told us to make sure that we made CTE available to a broader, and I quote, a broader range of students. And he also said in his report, we should make sure that CDOS is more readily available to students with special needs, 2018. Again, within that 3-year period. I just want to make sure that while we make sure that students of color and students with disabilities are getting are being pushed to their max to make sure that every power that they have in them is being utilized to get the kinds of degrees that really push them. Understand this, that if we expanded the number of students who were eligible for these alternative pathways, it was because, again, I'll use Dr. Morse's language, the state pulled a lever exactly in 2016, and then reminded us through Dr. Kino in 2018, you need to do more of this. And as some of you know, I sent a letter, I still have it here, dated March the 10th, 2020, directly to the then interim Commissioner Tahoe and Chancellor Rosa, because there was a report that was written that said, hey, it said 11%, didn't say 25%, it said 11% of your students have these alternative diplomas. And I said, and Dr. Jallo knows this, I said to the interim commissioner and to the chancellor, hey, listen, don't go out there and tell us to do something, which is expand the opportunities in 2016, 2018, that was clearly the directive, and then criticize us or have other people criticize us because we have done that. So when we talk about levers, we have to understand 2016, 2018, they gave us a specific direction to move in this direction. And then the other thing that I want to be clear about this is Dr. Morris says that, and she's correct, that the numbers, our graduation rate went up in those years, and a greater portion of it is related to the directive that we received in 2016, 2018. But we got to remind ourselves, our graduation rate has been going up since 2006. In 2006, the state reported we had a 4-year graduation rate of 39%. So long before this directive from the state in 2016, in 2018, give more CDOS opportunities, give more career path opportunities. Long before that, our graduation rate has been going up steadily since 2006, when it reached an all-time low for the district, and has gone up, with the exception of 1 year, every year about 2 or 3 percentage points. So yeah, we have gotten a bump from, again, the state telling us to make sure that special needs students and students of color weren't being prevented from graduating. Let's release them from the global exam, is what they said. So we'll do the 4+1. We did that, and then the irony is, you have people now saying, well, wait a second, and again, that was done so that people of color could graduate. But now people are saying, well, let's make sure. So, and so again, I've yet to see, and Dr. Jallo, I'll say it to you again, and I hope the chancellor is listening, because I've said it to her. Please, if we follow your direction of your distinguished educator and your 2016 directive, don't leave us out there hanging. Don't let people think that we're just giving away, as one newspaper said, watered down diplomas. We're doing exactly what we were told to do by the distinguished educator and by the commissioner and the Board of Regents in 2016. And again, let me remind folks, prior to all that 3-year period, our graduation rate has steadily been going up. I see Commissioner Malloy and then Commissioner Powell.
Thank you, President White. And I just apologize in advance. The rain above my head is very noisy on the rooftop, so apologies. I just want to say that this is absolutely incredible. It's very thorough. So I just want to give a heartfelt thanks to both Dr. Morris and Dr. Myers-Small. Excellent work. I'm really impressed. Your expertise is evident throughout the plan that we were given. So thank you so much. But my question is more along the lines of special education. We have seen SPED in the news a lot lately for our district. And I'm wondering if you could perhaps clarify or briefly summarize how or where special education falls within this plan. You know, how does special education fall within the metrics? Thank you.
Sure. So there are, we talked about the performance trends and the targets. So we have 11 targets that look at different demographic groups of students. And we look at the all category, and then we look at Black, Latinx, students with disabilities, and ELL students. So those performance targets are the 4-year graduation rate, the dropout rate, those students who achieve the CCCR, the college, career, and civic readiness, the number of credits to be on track to go from 9th to 10th grade. We look at 3 through 8 proficiency on math and ELA, as well as the mean growth percentile. And then also chronic absenteeism in grades 1 through 8, 9 through 12. We look at suspensions, and we also specifically look at the percentage of students with disabilities in the least restrictive environment. So there are 12 performance targets that specifically address our students with disability, that are measuring achievement or success or achievement related data of students with disabilities.
Thank you.
You all set, Commissioner Malloy? Okay, I'm looking at the participant screen. I don't see any other questions. So I think we're set.
Except myself.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Powell. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Well, my last comment was inspired by yours, President White, and I appreciate you putting this conversation in the historical context without it being a lengthy grievance. I think that it's important. Context is extremely important. And along that vein, there was one chart in the presentation, the one that showed the different levers that Dr. Morris described, and she indicated that she listed the state average and how that was impacted, and at the same time as it showed Rochester's scores. And to that, I want to say that even having been there through all of those years, when the standards changed, every time that standards changed, Rochester dropped more than other districts. Mostly all urban districts dropped more than the state average. And the fact that we've gotten to the place where we are, where we need intervention, academic as well as fiscal, shows that we're just have been intractably unresponsive in the past. And many of the big five, or all of the big five, had struggled with this because big districts just are not as flexible, not as agile, and able to change their practices in response to changing expectations. But realistically, the fact that we have a state monitor is a reflection of the fact that even among our peers, the big five, we've been less responsive than most to those changing standards. So, but not by much. Statistics, the data points are measured in fractions of percentages. That what divides us from our other urban districts academically are measured in fractions of percentage points, not in huge numbers. So I want to thank you, President White, for putting it in historical context. We were in a deep hole, some of it of our own making and some of it imposed on us. And I think a lot of it is the institutional racism, quite frankly, that's every time we catch a break, folks decide that that's actually us gaming the system instead of simply, responding to the changing culture. And the other, though, and the more for us, is those core beliefs that were on your second slide, and feeding again into the presentation I saw earlier today. Something there's a saying that's been used many times over the years: the soft bigotry of low expectations. That's what we have to overcome. First, especially amongst our frontline practitioners, we have to overcome the soft bigotry of low expectations, and to believe in our kids. And that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. I just want to sort of piggyback on your comment about context, just so that it's clear, leaving the long commentary aside, just looking at the dates, because one could think that we were gaming the system when in fact we were given directives in 2016 and 2018. And if people just focus on that, they would think, oh, well, they got the increases just because of that. Well, again, I would repeat, we were responding to a direct directive from the Board of Regents, coinciding with that 3-year period, 2016, 2018. But what I want people to know is, even leaving that aside, 2016 and 18, that directive, from 2007 to 2017, our graduation rate was going up. I don't want people to think that, I use your language, Commissioner Powell, that if they focus just on the last 3 years, they'll think we were gaming the system, because they're not going to listen.
Oh, President White, you froze. Mid-sentence, you froze.
Okay, Vice President Elliott, would you mind continuing on by facilitating?
Not at all. So Commissioner Powell, did you have something else to share?
No, thank you. That covered it.
Okay, any other?
It looks like Commissioner Adams has a point.
All right, Commissioner Adams?
Oh,
yeah.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Could you guys not hear what I said?
Right.
You froze.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Adams, why don't you go ahead and I'll pick back up on what I was saying. I'm sorry. I thought you could hear me. Commissioner Adams, go ahead.
Okay, just for the sake of saying something, I just wanted to say that I'm going to support this, especially what stood out for me was Commissioner Vice President Elliott speaking on what I expected her to speak on, because she spoke on it at the legislative breakfast. Her and Councilman Lightfoot, in your historical input on it was all well and good too. But what stood out for me is the fact that they have this thing on here at the beginning of Dr. Morris's slide about monitor and adjust. That leaves some wiggle room for us to basically deal with the unexpected. And that's a really realistic approach to have. And so I'm going to support this. And so, and that's all I wanted to say. Everybody else said a lot of good stuff. And for the sake of saying something, I said that, and I'm done.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Anybody else? I don't know at what point I cut off, but I did want to say that I want to piggyback on Commissioner Powell's comment about historical context. 2016, 2018, I indicated, were levers pulled by the state, clearly telling us to move in the direction of making sure that special needs students and students specifically of color weren't being denied an opportunity to graduate because many of them were stuck with the global exam, for example. So, so you see an expansion of the number of students with the local diplomas in the last 3 years, again, because the state pulled a lever and we responded appropriately. But I just wanted to be clear, because I don't want, Commissioner Powell used the phrase that I think some people have used, which is that we were gaming the system. And I'm not talking about anybody here, I'm talking about some editorials that occurred. They said that these were watered down diplomas. Even if you talk about those diplomas for the last 3 years, which weren't watered down, which were done consistent with the levers pulled by the state. I want folks to know that prior to that 3-year period, from 2007 to 2017, our graduation rate, which had reached an all-time low in 2006 of 39%, was steadily going up. And the reason why it's important to remember that context is, if people are inclined to ignore the fact that we got directives in 2016 and 2018, and they are inclined to think we were gaming the system, and that would be totally wrong, by the way. I want people to know that there were thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of students who were graduating on time in ever increasing numbers from 2007 to 2017, prior to that 3-year period. And they were doing it, check this out, they were doing it as the standards were increasing, because every year from 2007 on up, they were increasing the number of Readiness exams that these students had to pass and to graduate. So let's leave aside the 3-year period. where again, the state was telling us, do more of this, give more people of color these opportunities. I want you all to, and people, you all know this, but people watching, I want people to know that that's not the whole of our existence in terms of our moving the graduation rate the last 3 years. Prior to that, every year for the last, 10 years? I think with the exception of 1 year where it went down 1 year, I think Bohan Vargas was here. Our graduation rate has gone up every year. And again, remember, it's doing this as the state is increasing the number of Regents exams that our children have to graduate. And also remember, people like me, I didn't have to take a single Regents exam, and the one that I did, I failed. To Vice President Elliott's point. And I'm not countering what Dr. Morris said. As I said earlier on, I think we have to maximize, really push our kids to get the Regents if they can get it. But again, if there's any movement to sort of let some children be exempt from that, it came at the direction of New York State. And when I asked them, when they wrote that vile stuff about our kids getting watered down diplomas, I asked our commissioner and I asked our chancellors, say something. You told us to do this, and all I got, I want to be honest, was crickets. And it shouldn't be that way. They have to decide if they really want us to do this, we will do it. But if they don't, if they don't want us to do it, they should tell us that. But clearly in 16 and 18, they were telling us to do it. And even Dr. Aquino said, make more use of it. So I don't want to see us get criticized for doing exactly in the last 3 years what the state told us to do. Prior to that, it was all us. It was all our students. It was all our families making these increases. Okay, let me go back to the participant screen, see if there's any other comments.
President White,
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to mention that I am fully amenable with alternate pathways. As a matter of fact, I graduated utilizing an alternate pathway, and I too never took a Regents exam. So I just want to say I am fully in support of alternate pathways. What I am also in support of is ensuring that our students, regardless of their background, their color, their ethnicity, their income, their household, etc., are all given the access to a rigorous diploma that will serve them as they proceed in life. But I just wanted to make sure I stated for the record, I have used an alternate pathway, and I too had that, and I have not graduated with taking any Regents exams.
And I want to say I agree with you too. To your other point, which is, and maybe I didn't articulate it as good as I should have. I said push, shove, do what we need to get. That's the rigorous diploma. That's the pushing of kids to get the thing that works best for them is what you're talking about. And I agree with you 101%. And I think that the plan that you guys have laid out gets us there. So that I'm clear, I'm very supportive of what you guys have done. I just want to make sure the community understands where people like you and me come from in terms of supporting our kids. However we get them across, we're going to get them across the best we can. So I'm very supportive of this, and I don't want that to be unclear by my comments either. All right. Thank you again, Dr. Morris, Dr. Myers. We really do appreciate your work. You've gotten us, speaking of progress, to a place that we haven't been in a couple of years. We haven't had a strategic plan. And as I think one of my colleagues said, you did it in record time, in a comprehensive, very cogent and clear way, how we are going to be or where we're going to be in the future. So thank you very much for that. Any other questions or comments? Because I think at this particular point, unless there aren't any, we're going to vote on having a strategic plan for the next 3 years. If there are no further comments, can I get a motion?
Motion.
Motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy, seconded by Commissioner Adams. The motion is, of course, to approve the strategic management plan drafted by, of course, not only Dr. Myers and Dr. Morris, but lots of other people. I know lots of other people. All those in favor of the plan proposed by Dr. Myers-Small, please indicate by turning on your screens and saying a hearty yes.
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 Yes, and I just want to also just thank Dr. Myers and your team and everyone who worked on this, and being patient with getting to the board to vote yes on it. But thank you guys for all the work that you've done, for everyone involved.
Absolutely awesome. Is any nays? I don't think so. So now you can press your little applaud things, or you can applaud in real person. I see Dr. Myers has a celebration thing. I haven't seen that one before. I have to try that one. Commissioner LeBron just did this. Is this a new icon? I never saw that one before. That's pretty cool. Again, Dr. Myers, you'll have to excuse me for doing this, but I know that you gave this principally to Dr. Morris as part of one of her first tasks. And I hope you don't mind if, on behalf of the board, I thank her specifically.
Absolutely.
This is awesome work done in a record period of time, as one of my colleagues said, and it's really going to move us into the future. So thank you very much for leading this particular effort, particularly it being one of your first efforts. And I see Dr. Myers is feeling real good, as she should be. All right, next item on the agenda, Dr. Shelley Jallow, this is a hard act to follow, but it is it's your responsibility, so it's on you.
It's going to be very easy because you approved the strategic plan.
Yeah, all right.
Now, if you didn't approve the strategic plan, my presentation would have been very, very short. Okay, but I thank you because it's part and parcel of the academic plan that this strategic plan is approved. So in all seriousness, I am very thankful of that. And I'll ask Kalia to bring it up. It's going to be rather short. It's just an overview, kind of similar to what we did with the financial plan the other day. Next slide, please. So this is just a reminder from the public meeting. This is kind of the official, what the state monitor is supposed to do. There's nothing new here about being on the board, about helping with a conflict of interest policy. There's nothing really new here. The idea, the need to present 2 plans to you on November 1st, which will be done. And beginning with the next school year, making sure that your budget is balanced. And that actually starts with working with everyone in the district now to make sure this year's budget is the best that it can be so that next year we can start off in a good place. Next slide, please. I also brought up this slide also because I think it's powerful, but I just wanted to look at it from a slightly different point of view. And that point of view is 2 or 3-fold. Number one, the same thing that plagued Rochester plagued other districts as well throughout the state. And that's something that I want to bring to your attention. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention is the difference between the blue lines and the purple lines. And that our children have to compete in any way, whether it's for a job or whether a spot in college, with the children who are at the purple line and above. So I just want us to keep that in mind. And when we make statements like, well, you know, these couple of years we did it and those couple of years we didn't do it, that we kind of stop for a minute and remember that we're talking about hundreds, literally thousands of children who did it or didn't do it, or have to make tough decisions because somehow they did not get everything that they needed while they were at Rochester City School District. So I just want us to kind of slow down and make sure we really understand what the lines represent. Next slide. So you've seen this as well. The same thing is true. I had a slightly different experience as a high school student. I had to take every single Regents exam. And I only mention that because it doesn't matter, because the world that I walked out of high school into is quite different than the world we exist in now. And that's one of the reasons why things have changed over the years. We can even say the children that graduated last June walked into a world that is totally different than the ones who walked out of your high schools this past June. So life has changed, and that's why high school graduation requirements have to change with it, because the demands of the children when they come out of high schools change and have changed. They've changed from when I graduated, they've changed from when you graduated, they've changed over the last year. And so it's also our responsibility to make sure that our curriculum and our programs change with those times. You do have a CTE program. You have made a commitment to one of your schools in CTE, but that is also a school and an area that needs attention, needs resources, and needs to be improved. That's something that I would ask that the board consider. You'll see it in the plan when you get it, that there is a recommendation around high school programming and how you resource it and how you support it. Next slide. So these are some of the general observations. You know, all levels of the organization must make a long-term commitment to focusing resources to the acceleration of teaching and learning in this district. So everybody talks about continuous improvement, and that is certainly important, but some of the scores that we are demonstrating are the scores that our children are demonstrating through assessments, and acknowledging that there are other ways to assess children other than tests, suggests that we have to accelerate. It's beyond improvement, it's around acceleration. We have to make up for lost time, we have to make up for a gap that is growing, unfortunately. A similar commitment should be made to redirect resources away from programs, practices, and partners that have been unable to demonstrate evidence of producing positive outcomes in the areas of teaching and learning. We have a challenge, a fiscal challenge, and even though this is a presentation around academics, we still have a fiscal challenge. But I'm not suggesting that we look for more money, but what I am suggesting at this point for this number 2 is that we look at what we have. We look at what we have and we make a determination through some rubric or metrics or algorithm or whatever as to whether or not it is helping us increase our graduation rate. Make sure that more children learn how to speak English. Make sure that our special ed children are graduating college and/or career ready. Make sure that the metrics that we have selected become a reality. And that means saying no to certain things. That means accessing certain things and making that determination that this is not working in the best interest of our children. Number 3, I've observed that the district has been challenged with the full execution of programs and plans, and therefore training on core components of implementation science. This district has a gazillion wonderful ideas, great programs. Where you have demonstrated that more support is needed is in executing those programs, executing those ideas to fruition on behalf of children and those individuals who teach children. Number 4, the collection and examination of accurate, reliable data to measure teaching and learning in every classroom so that we can accelerate that learning. We have a challenge with data integrity in the district. Our systems don't always produce accurate data, and because we have a challenge with accurate data being accessible, it causes us sometimes to make decisions, and it informs decisions that sometimes are not in the best interest of children because our data was not where it should be. It was not clean, it was not accessible, it was not accurate. And so we have to do a better job around all types of data, student data, staff data, chronic absenteeism data, attendance. We just need to do a better job so that we can depend more on our data with some kind of level of confidence beyond what we have now. The district must equitably distribute district resources to keep a diverse student population engaged in lifelong learning. An observation is the disproportionality around how resources are allocated in your buildings. Resources, whether it's books, whether it's people, whether it's administrators, there's just, when you start to unpack your data, you start to see the inequity in the different things that you have in your schools to support teaching and learning. And that's something that we control, that's something that doesn't cost money, and that's something that we really must do to make sure that we are being true to the students, diverse student population that you're serving here in the district. The 6 observations the district must expand, interesting, I didn't know we would have this conversation tonight, expand the definition of district success beyond the singular notion of graduation rates to include a portrait of a graduate grounded in college, career, and civic readiness. When you hear the work that's being done at the state, it's around looking at different high school options, different ways to look at high school, but also different ways that children, different pathways for children to travel in order to graduate from high school. So sure, the numbers are great and sure, the numbers are increasing, but the reality is we have access to data that shows when our children get to college, they are not ready. if they get to college. And those who have gone to college, some of them are showing, we have data to show that some of them are not doing well when they get to college for lack of preparation for that level of rigor at the college level. So that's something that we can control, that's something that we can fix, and that's something that we've put steps together and action steps and plans together to make sure that that becomes a reality for every student that leaves your campuses. Next one, and the last one, non-negotiable practice. If you remember nothing else, remember this, we have to hold each other accountable. There is a lack of accountability that travels through this district that we have to address. Just an observation that we have to clearly communicate what the expectation is, and then we have to support people and then hold them accountable and responsible for that success. And that's everybody. That's not just teachers, it's not just administrators, that's not just the superintendent, it's everybody has to be held accountable. Everybody is responsible. And I think that that's a key item that will help not only see our academic progress, but the fiscal progress as well. Next one. The academic plan for organization purposes is organized around 4 domains: leadership, talent development, instructional transformation, and culture shift. And it also looks at how fiscal sustainability, performance focus, operations, and strategic planning will support those things. So when you see the plan, it'll be in these sections, and you'll see findings and recommendations based on these sections, with the idea that we're remaining student-centered and equity-driven. Next one. So this is an example of what you will see. So under the instructional transformation domain, achievement outcomes for special education students attending district schools remain statistically stagnant and continue to lag behind state averages. We've seen that in some of the data that has been shown over the last couple of weeks. The percentage of students with disabilities who performed on a state assessment 1% grew by 1% between 2018 and 19. In 2019, 3% of the students with disabilities performed at or above proficiency on the state assessment. So that's a finding. Next slide. So here are some suggestions as to how to address that finding. We structured a chief academic office in such a way that your 4 core content areas have directors for elementary and secondary. That you have a director that looks at ENL and bilingual ed. That you have instructional personnel from special ed who support instruction will be assigned to the CAO. The budgets from bilingual ed and special ed will be apportioned to the Office of the Deputy of Teaching and Learning for the areas of instruction. All grant funded related to the improvement of student academic outcomes will be approved through the Deputy of Teaching and Learning and Office of the CAO. So you'll start to see specific steps of how you could approach supporting special ed achievement. The restructuring, these are tentative dates as to when some of these things can happen. The plan is over multiple years, so everything is not for next year. But this is an example of how the charts and how the report will be organized. Next step. Another example of a finding, there are 9 different school configurations in this district. Tried to list them all, I hope I got them all. The multiple school configurations have contributed to underutilization of school buildings, which leads to greater facilities and operations costs. Multiple grade level schools prohibit vertical articulation and collaboration. That's a fancy way of saying how schools talk to each other, how schools share data amongst each other, how schools looking at student performance as children travel from school to school, and how teachers collaborate together across the grades. The current district model prohibits this kind of collaboration between teachers and administrators between schools because everybody's working on different grade levels and different configurations. That's a finding. Next step. Next slide, please. So one of the recommendations is to establish a pre-K 5, 6, 8, 9, 12 school configuration as the dominant district structure. I am not saying you undo successful schools that have different configurations, but what I am saying, this should be the dominant structure for your district. It will help you with your transportation. It will help you with grading. It will help with professional development. It will help with the monitoring of educational programs, et cetera, et cetera. It'll help you fiscally in the way you organize your buildings. And just from a social emotional standpoint, the needs of a middle school child are very, very different from the needs of an elementary child and are different from the needs of a high school student. And to sometimes have them all together proves to be a very difficult challenge for teachers and administrators and parents in some cases as well. On the right-hand side, can you go back for a moment? On the right-hand side, what you'll see is some specific things that I would be looking for, or different metrics that I would be looking for, and when I would be looking to see them to determine whether or not the recommendation is one that is in place. So for instance, by phase one, you'll have a team, or maybe you'll have a task force who starts to work on and then presents a plan, and then also has a budget. The one thing I'm noticing, if I had to put another observation, plans without budgets. You have to put a dollar sign next to the things you say you're going to do. And I'm trying to get the district in the habit of making that a regular practice. Next slide. So to continue on, just a few more recommendations. Hold your staff accountable. Similar to last week, take chronic absenteeism as a joint city and district priority. I had this last week and I brought it back this week because at least for high school students, when high school students are chronically absent, it's not just, you have to really unpack it. Sometimes it's transportation, sometimes it's things going on at home or in their home life or their personal lives, but sometimes it's how they feel about how they're being treated in school. And they make a determination they'd rather not come to school or they'd rather not go to a particular class because they are somehow not having the type of feelings, the type of reception, the type of connection with their schools. So that's why I also put it on the academic side, because we can't increase academics if children are not in school, okay? Focus on curriculum and instruction. That has to be key, number one. That's our core business. And so therefore, you'll see in the plan, I have things about making sure all your core curriculums are up to date. No more 1990 anything, book, pamphlet, worksheet, no more, right? Support school leaders with best practices for supporting and supervising teaching and learning, right? When I spoke to the principals and APs, of course, they get professional development, but they're usually getting the professional development that the teachers are getting. We're not asking our principals to be teachers. We're asking our principals to supervise and support teachers. That's a different type of training. They deserve both, but they really deserve how do they support teachers and how do they support curriculum and instruction, not how to be a good teacher. It's a different type of skill set. They should have that already. If not, that's fine, but that's not what we're paying them to do. Reinvest in purposeful, data-driven staff training. Look at your data. You have data about teachers, data about students, data about parents, data about what's going on across the country. Use it and design your professional development around that. Make sure your professional development is multi-tiered. Everybody doesn't need the same thing at the same time. So take that into consideration when you design your professional development plans. On the other box, on the other side, hold your vendors, your CBOs, your FBOs, your institutions of higher learning accountable to the agreements. If they say that they are going to help you with chronic absenteeism or they're going to help you with a rigorous after-school program, then that's what they should do, and that's what they should have data to show that they in fact did that. You have to hold them accountable too, to be an accountable partner, just like the district should be an accountable partner to them as well. This is an interesting one. Hold staff accountable to standard operating procedures. First, you got to make sure you have standard operating procedures. They have to be kept up to date. And this is how you start to hold people accountable, but this is also how you support people. you have people who leave this organization, and when they leave, their knowledge, their institutional knowledge leaves with them. You still need some operating procedures so people can understand what to do and how best to do their jobs. And that seems to be a common theme no matter who I spoke with. Create a portfolio of high school programming. You do have high school programming at this point. I think it needs to be revisited so it addresses the needs of students, families, the community, and we had an excellent conversation today with the Chamber of Commerce. They have jobs sitting, waiting, unfilled, right? We need to partner with them around what are the jobs of the future? How do we prepare our students now for those jobs of the future? It happens in our schools first. So our high school programming needs to reflect those type of interests and those type of needs that have been communicated to us, not only across the country, but particularly in this Monroe County region. Update all K-12 curriculum materials. I won't say anything else about that. That's just so key. And transition to neighborhood community school model for K-12, for K-8. I could spend all night talking about how it just impacts academics and your fiscal stress. But I think it'll improve student engagement and family engagement if people are closer to the schools that they live by and can participate more actively and can feel a little bit more connected to the school as a part of their community, a part of their neighborhood. Next slide. And so, I just wanted to reiterate that, it's been wonderful working with everybody here at the district. Everybody has been very, very helpful and collaborative in working on plans and bouncing off ideas and trying to, looking at research and looking at data. And I dare say it's been kind of fun just having that intellectual back and forth and dialogue and debate around what's the best way to do the best things for the students here in the district. And so it comes back to the vision and the mission, and it comes back to the core priorities outlined in the earlier presentation, and more importantly, outlined in the work from the strategic plan. So that, I think, is it. The next steps is to get 2 plans to you, hopefully by midnight, November 1st. You'll have about 2 weeks to look it over, make comments, ideas. It's still a work in progress, and still opportunities for it to be altered and enhanced. During that 2-week period, we will also sponsor I was going to say open house, not an open house, a public hearing, so that we can hear more from the public about what their thoughts are, what they'd like to see in either one of these plans, and so it can get incorporated into the plan. Hopefully we will have absolute agreement, and then the next step would be to share it with the commissioner. And that's it for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Jallo. If you don't mind, I see a couple people who want to ask questions, and I'll begin with Commissioner Powell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know that you're looking to engage in a debate over some of those recommendations tonight. If not, what is that unveiling ceremony, the time to engage in that?
Either or. I mean, I think we have time to talk about it. It's nothing that is definite. It hasn't even all been put into the document. These are initial ideas, not just for myself, but from other people. It is entirely up to the board if you want to talk about it tonight, but we certainly have about 3 more weeks to have discussion and input about them.
And I would just also interject that the ESA committee was supposed to start at 7, so I'd like for you all to keep that in mind.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Vice President, I was going to say the exact same thing. This was slated to go from 5:35 to 7 p.m. This is important But maybe there is an opportunity, Commissioner Powell and Dr. Jallo, to maybe even have some offline discussion.
Absolutely.
And if necessary, if you think it's necessary, Dr. Jallo, if my colleagues think it's necessary, we probably can find some time to, wouldn't be in an ESA meeting, but at any special meeting, to probably set aside some time to give people maybe an opportunity to digest it a little bit too. But you could always call up Dr. Jallo too.
Yeah, I was going to say anytime.
Is that all right, Commissioner Powell?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I don't have any debates. I'm actually very excited about what you presented, and like the strategic plan, which is very detailed. So if folks have not read it, I mean, it is like, this is what we're gonna do. This is step one to get to step two, and I really appreciate that level of detail. One, I wanted to just address some of the things that do come up when students graduate from the district and are not academically prepared to go to college. They end up, entering MCC, where they take the AccuPlacer, where they test at what is called TRS, Transitional Studies classes, which eats up their financial aid. If they are a student who is connected with the Department of Human Services, either through their parent or themselves, they end up not being eligible to do WEP in a traditional way, and not being able to be identified as vocational education with the state. And so it really jeopardizes them while they're attending college courses. And it eats up their financial aid. They end up having to take out larger loans to complete, if they complete. And so we have to be mindful about real consequences after students leave RCSD. And I cannot begin to tell you the hundreds of students that I saw every year in the same particular situation when I worked at MCC, and I oversaw the WEP program. So I truly understand how the DHS regulations really impact these decisions and how they're all, it's a ripple effect that's all connected. So I'm glad that you are going to have a focus on that. And I will tell you that the colleges, and in particular MCC, would be a great partner to pull some of that data, because they have the data on the students from RCSD that end up in transitional studies and having to take out larger loans. Yes to accountability, to partners that we do contracts with. Yes to neighborhood schools. This is something that I have heard from multiple people in the community, how they want us to be in a neighborhood school model. And I also think if you look at how Buffalo kind of modeled a little bit of their resources, how they reconstructed, they did it by quadrants. And so their partners are based on the quadrant around them. So all the schools, the banks are linked with them, the CBOs for that area. And I think that that is something that could potentially be brought here to Rochester in that same format to support our schools and our families in each of the quadrants. I have one more point. I'm particularly the most excited, Dr. Jallo, if this is done appropriately and correctly, is the concept of really changing our systems from pre-K to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 to 12. And you may not know this, but when I ran multiple times, by the way, when I really ran on the concept too, that 6 to 8 is really the grades that we really need to provide the most emotional supports and social services to our students. It is a very difficult age group, the hormonal, the transition that they are experiencing, but also statistically, it's the age group and the grades where we tend to lose students, and their passion and love for education can kind of go either way at those ages if they don't have the proper supports in place. So I would love for us to really explore transitioning into these grades, but also ensuring that 6th to 8th and particularly have the supports in the schools that our students are going to need, and our staff. Let me say that too. Our staff need the extra support to deal with the 6th through 8th. It is not an easy group to work with, although I know high school can be challenging. They have a little bit more comprehension, and even pre-K through 5, they're challenging as well, but they at least still have that cuteness factor still going for them. 6 to 8 can be a very difficult, challenging group. So I would love to make sure that our students and our staff both had the supports in those grades. And so with that, I'm done.
The Commissioner Powell has raised her hand again.
Quick question. I mean, I have a lot to say on both of the major points there, but my quick question is, does anyone know when No Child Left Behind was replaced by ESA, did the requirement disappear that the districts had to provide families the option of or access to a school that was higher performing? Like No Child Left Behind, part of the reason that why the administration embraced managed choice when it came out was that at the same time No Child Left Behind required that students in low performing schools be given access by some mechanism to higher performing schools. Did that go away when ESA replaced No Child Left Behind?
I don't know exactly. I mean, I have an idea, but I'd rather give you an accurate answer. But the one reason why I don't particularly like doing these type of presentations because it's done in isolation. The reality is, if we're going to move towards neighborhood schools, at the same time, that's why I did pick the slide and the point around building up your academic programming. You have got to build up your school so people feel confident that the school down the block from their house is a school where their child can get a good education.
Well, I understand that, but the question is,
your question, I don't know, but I can find out.
Well, the question isn't about whether families feel good about the school down the street. School is, from a federal law perspective, if the school down the street is not a performing school, we have a legal obligation to provide them another alternative. At least that's the way it was with No Child Left Behind. And I haven't heard any information that suggests that that ESA has eliminated that requirement.
I don't have it in front of me, but I believe there was a change in that requirement under the new law that was codified under the Every Student Succeeds Act. So I can get you that exact language, but there was a change in that requirement once we changed to the new accountability system.
Okay, because there's a middle ground here that would allow families choice and therefore potentially not losing them to charter schools, because that's, if we don't offer choice, then the families will find their own choices, typically by going to charter schools. There's a version of managed choice that instead of working within zones and worrying about the people gaming the choice system, there's another way of doing it that it's called zoneless choice that allows families to pick from the nearest schools. So in other words, if a family has 3 schools that are all walking distance from them, they have equal right to any of those 3 schools, as opposed to living in a catchment area where the district decides what school they go to. The fact is, if parents have a choice, they're going to exercise that choice and typically feel good about being able to exercise a choice within the district. Too often, our families are choosing based on whether they can get access to buses or not. But before we get too far down the road in a conversation about neighborhood schools, all of us on this call have to have a firm understanding of the structural displacement of the fact that our schools are not where our kids are, and vice versa. Until we really understand how deep a problem that is, we're not going to be able to have a very intelligent conversation about what neighborhood schools look like. Some schools will be able to potentially create a very, very neat catchment area, but others, you either won't be able to fill the school, or you'll have enough kids to fill the school 3 times over and nowhere to put the overflow. So until we have an understanding and I had an understanding 16 years ago, but demographics have changed. So we all, including me, have to have a better understanding of what the factors on the ground are before we can go very deep, and especially wouldn't want to make a blanket acceptance of a recommendation without a deep understanding of that problem.
So maybe you didn't see it. The recommendation is for you to start with a task force to look at the feasibility of such. Am I on mute?
No.
One of the recommendations is for a task force to be established to look at the feasibility of doing this.
That would be great.
What I don't want the board to do is status quo. Let's not look at it. Let's just keep going the way it's going.
I don't think anyone's happy with the status quo.
So yeah, so I mean, you need a feasibility. Your points are well taken, but I do think you need to move in that direction to really study really hard data. I've started looking at some of the scatter plots of where people live versus where the schools are and so forth and so on. I just think you need to start. You need to start.
Thank you, Dr. Zhao and Commissioner Powell. Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, so I just want to say to Dr. Jallo and to the community that's listening and to Dr. Myers, because you guys were not here, Elizabeth Hallmark, she was the commissioner on the school board. She had a task force and had findings that were presented to the board in a report. So she spent a significant amount of time doing that. This district also had previously, Barbara Dean Williams hired the consultant that helped draft this policy for school choice for the district, a decade and a half ago, come in, and the school board spent a number of hours looking at 3 different options and going through them in detail on Saturdays sometimes. And you know what the board did? They voted to keep the current policy with fidelity. And I think that was probably one of the first times where I really snapped at everybody, because I was really upset that we had spent all this time, went through the concept of a task force, looked at this data, had this man being paid, a consultant, a high paid consultant at that, and to present the school board with options, and then for them to choose to continue with the same policy with fidelity, and then not even define fidelity. What did that mean? That meant nothing, literally meant nothing. And so, yeah, we continue with status quo, Dr. Jallo. So I'm ready, and I'm excited about neighborhood schools. I'm ready to move forward. And I would ask potentially Kalia, our board clerk, I can work with her to locate all of that data and all that information that was presented. We literally got a binder full of information from the consultant on these different options with lots of data points. And so potentially gathering that information and presenting it back to you guys so you guys could review it and see if that's enough, or there's a different scope that you want to look at in terms of the data. The other piece I will say is that when Terry was here, he was starting to look at where our students lived versus where the schools they actually attended. And we were able to already identify a number of schools where our students are living nowhere near any of the zones based on our own policy. And that's for a number of reasons, but the reality is that we think we have a school policy that has these zonings, and the reality is that our students attend all schools from all different sides of the city, and it really doesn't make any sense when you break it down where their address is, our own policy, and what schools they're attending. So I'm not looking for another task force, but I will work with Kalia to gather that information that has been done already, and she can send it out to you guys and the full board to review it again and then make a determination from there.
So, Dr. Jallo, thank you for presenting your ideas and being willing to say, hey, listen, there's time to have more conversations. Very briefly, because I know we're cutting into big time into Vice President Elliott's time. If you've noted, it's extremely complicated. I mean, even these discussions that were had before, there's no shutting the book on these. I mean, for example, we all know this. One of the reasons why many parents put their kids on buses is because the neighborhood isn't safe. So they choose not to go to the neighborhood school because they don't want their little precious child walking through the neighborhood. So it is very, and I'm not making excuses, it is very complicated. And I think your idea about a task force, although Lord knows we have studied this idea before, is probably a wise one. This task force with a limited time period and a definitive action step. But again, this is extremely complicated. And you mentioned this notion of making sure that if you have neighborhood schools, you got to make sure people have an equal opportunity to have decent schools in their neighborhood. So that's got to change too. If you're going to really say, okay, you're quote unquote stuck in your neighborhood, well, they ought to have a chance to have decent schools, so good opportunities. And so it is extremely difficult. And I think you've acknowledged that, and your call for task force is not a delay, but it's even if the task force were to look at all the existing reports, I don't know exactly how you think it would be done, but we could talk for hours, and Vice President would kill me because we would go into our time. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that you use the phrase acceleration, and I assume what you mean by that is accelerate the rate in which, we talk about the increase in graduation rate. Well, what has not moved in any significant way is these ELA and math scores, and they are abysmally low. And that will be, until I leave this district, a real regret that I had. So when you talk about acceleration, I think what you're saying is what I would like to see. We can't have these things go up in like 5%, 0.5% increments. That's just not acceptable. There's thousands of kids that are lingering in this from kindergarten or pre-K up to 12th grade. So I'm thinking, and this is a comment, you and I, or we could talk about it later. I'm thinking in order to get that acceleration, we have to focus on parent outreach and support. We have to focus on professional development of our staff. And then we have to really move, talking about move, we have to move on this notion of curriculum. How are we going to perfect it? How are we going to, if this is the argument, standardize it and make sure that everybody has access to it? So we can talk later. That's not for debate, but I think that's, I'm encouraged by this. And to be honest, I haven't had a chance to read it, Dr. Jallo, comprehensively. I will. And it's an exciting development for our district. Okay, I don't see any other hands being raised. Vice President Elliott, the gavel is yours. Sorry about the delay.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm going to call the Excellence in Student Achievement Committee together. Do I need to do that?
Yep, I guess you just did.
All right. So the items that we're going to be discussing tonight is a possible ESA name change. I'll talk about that. We'll talk about our brainstorming session and the work plan that we should derive from that brainstorming session that we did last month. And then I want to talk about basically how do we communicate out this work that we're doing. And so Marisol will help to begin to have those kinds of conversations. I think that this committee is a very vital committee to our community, and how do we keep them informed about the work that we're going to be doing. And so without any further hesitation, the ESA name change proposal. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, you are perfectly fine.
Okay, all right. So the ESA name change, someone from the community thought we should change the name, and it resonates with me actually, from excellence in student achievement to equity in student achievement. And the reason I think that that's important to do is because of, we're framing the work that we're doing around equity. And so I'm proposing that we make that name change from Student Excellence and Student Achievement Committee to Equity and Student Achievement, simply because that's what we're framing our work in. That's what we want to focus in on. And I think that with that name, in addition, it will help us to stay focused on the work that we're doing and to ensure that that work, there's equity within that work. And so I'll open it up for some discussion. Now, I can't see anyone, any hands. So well, hold on just a second. Maybe I can. Okay, so I'm going to ask for any discussion around changing the name from Excellence in Student Committee, Student Achievement to Equity in Student Achievement. And I see Commissioner LeBron's hand raised.
I just want to say I support it. I think it's actually a really great suggestion, and I just want to say I support it. So I don't know if we're voting tonight on it, but I'm with it.
All right. And now I see President White's hand raised.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to unmute myself. I'm not opposed to adding equity, but I do think even though equity should mean everybody's entitled to a level of excellence, I don't want the concept of the need for us to have excellence in our administration of educational programming to be lost, because I think it should be implicitly understood that if everybody receives excellent, let's say, curriculum, then that there is equity. But I'm concerned that if we just say equity, the concept of excellence might be lost. So what I would propose is the ESA committee, excellence and equity, or equity and excellence in student achievement.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Adams? Commissioner Adams? Okay.
I support. You hear me?
Now I can hear you, Commissioner.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I said I just wanted to say that I support it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Commissioner Malloy?
We definitely want to include equity in the title, but I just am inclined to agree with President White on this, that we should include both excellence as well as equity, if possible.
So if we're talking about adding both, you know, it seems a little choppy to me to say both of those. I don't know if how it, you know, that flows. So excellence, I don't know how that flows. Seems to me we only either do equity or we do excellence. So I'm not sure how to say that. Commissioner Malloy, is that a new hand?
No, that was the old hand.
Okay. Any further conversation? I think there are three of us who's interested in the equity of student achievement. Commissioner President White, I see your hand up.
There you go. Equity and excellence in student achievement. It's, you know, it's a little bit longer, but you know, it's a compromise. And you know, it doesn't. When you add excellence to equity, it doesn't take away from equity, and vice versa. I mean, I don't, it may not be roll off the tongue as smooth, but maybe it shouldn't. Maybe people should hear each and every item that is important to us. Excellence and equity in student achievement. Slow it down. Let people hear what we want.
Yeah, I think I will reverse that, because I like to have equity be first myself. Anybody else have another perspective?
Just a historical one. This committee used to be called Quality Assurance, and it, notwithstanding the name, it covered all the same material. So I am like totally uninvested in this conversation. It's the one committee whose name has changed constantly, and I don't see any really great outcomes coming from the committee year after year.
Excellence and equity in student achievement.
But Vice President Elliott, did you say you liked, if we were to do it, you like equity first?
Well, I'm sort of trying to, I'm saying it to see how it flows. I'm seeing excellence and equity as student achievement. Go ahead, Mr. President.
No, I'm just going to say I'm not opposed to whatever, makes, if you're comfortable with equity being first, and I could understand why you might not flow as well, but I could see why you'd want to put equity first. I'm not opposed to that. I'm just saying, I don't think it would hurt us to put both words out there. And to Commissioner Powell's point, it is not going to be a decisive thing for the work of the committee, but maybe people in response to Commissioner Powell's point, maybe people might hear what our priorities are when you say, hey, we've got several committees. One of them is equity and excellence in student achievement. Maybe it's not going to affect the outcome. Commissioner Powell is probably right. Unless we get our act together and start really, you through your leadership, start really pushing an agenda of change through the superintendent and Dr. Jallo's plan as well. But I don't think it could hurt us to compromise and have both words in there.
Yeah, so I'd like to go with equity first. So equity and excellence in student achievement. So can I get a motion for that?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I'm going to say nay. I just want one name, and I think it's really confusing to expect that the community is going to learn this long name, and they don't even know what this committee is about yet. So
yeah,
I'm a nay. I would support just the equity, though. And I also just want to say, I don't want to give lip service to excellence when we haven't even gotten there. And that should be an expectation anyway.
Well, if I could just add, it could also be, honestly.
You don't need to add. We're good. You guys voted already. Thank you.
No, I don't think we have a vote yet. I don't think, I don't know if I heard Commissioner Adams or Commissioner Powell.
Just saying, Vice President Elliott, we don't have equity either. We don't have excellence or equity.
Oh, okay. So, Commissioner Powell?
I'm sorry, I went looking for a school law book. As I said, I am not invested in this conversation. I will accept the will of the body.
All right, Commissioner Adams. Commissioner Adams?
I think he's frozen.
I believe he's frozen.
Okay, all right. Are there all 6 of us here tonight?
There are all 6 of you. Right now, Commissioner Powell, you said that you'll go with the will of the board. Right now, there are 3 yeses and 1 no, without Commissioner Adams weighing in as he's frozen. Are you willing to go with the yeses, or would you like to err on the side of no?
I guess I'd rather wait till Ricardo's unfrozen, let him be the decider.
Okay, Commissioner Adams, what is your vote? Oh, he froze again.
Vice President Elliott, and all due respect, Commissioner Malloy.
So
Go ahead.
my vote was a no.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So you do not have then enough votes to pass it, equity and excellence.
All right, can we propose the equity and student achievement proposal to see if we have the votes for that?
A motion.
All right, can I get a second?
Second. Listen, let me just say, it's not worth arguing over. It really isn't. We should spend very little time on this. I support equity. If you equity and student achievement, it's not.
All right.
Not worth
Okay.
arguing.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you very much, commissioners. So we have a new name change, Equity in Student Achievement. Thank you all very much. The next item is the work plan. I'm going to ask Rahima or Kalia to put up the brainstorming session that we had done. We had offered a lot of great stuff, and of course we can't do it all this year, but we need to prioritize of what it is that we really want to be able to work on for this school year. There are about, how many things, is there 17 or are there more than that, Kalia, 19? So if you could take a look at those things in terms of the priority, and also if we can ensure that we are prioritizing these in line with the strategic plan that the superintendent and the deputy superintendent just presented to us, and also in line with what the state monitor, Dr. Jallo, just shared with us. So if we can frame our decision in terms of the priorities that we have from this brainstorming session, I think we can, put 5 items or so, or however many, in order to reduce this list that we're going to work on for the remainder of the year. So I'll open it up for discussion at this point.
Kalia, could you enlarge that on the screen, please, just so we can see a little more clearly?
Vice President Elliott, would it be, because this is the first time I'm seeing this, would it be helpful if we brought this back and we discuss it with Dr. Morris and Melody, and we come back to you with administration and the team, and come back with administration's kind of prioritized list of this?
Okay, so let me just have the commissioners to react to that.
Okay.
Is what the superintendent suggested. Are we okay with that, commissioners?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm fine
Okay.
with it too, because I would like her input, especially if we have questions around the document.
Yeah. Commissioner Adams?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Powell? Is Commissioner Powell there?
Sorry, the dog is whining. Tell me what the question is again.
We were looking at, Commissioner Powell, prioritizing this brainstorming that we did in the last meeting. The superintendent is asking us to have them to take back this brainstorming session so that they can have their input in it. My comment is that we need to align our brainstorming with the strategic plan, as well as with Dr. Jallo's academic plan. So she's suggesting that they take it before we make a decision on that, so that the district has its input. So are you okay with that?
Yep, totally.
All right. So we'll do that, Dr. Myers-Small.
Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Adams, I just saw a hand. Was that a new hand?
No, that was from before, because I needed you to enlarge the screen too.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Vice President Elliott?
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say I'm supportive of it as well. The idea.
That's right. I'm sorry.
No,
Thank
worries,
you.
No worries.
All right. And so the next item is the ESA communications. I want us to really begin to communicate and have out in the community the work that this committee is doing. And so I talked about, the different platforms that are being used. We can use Twitter or the Facebook, but what we're doing in this committee, I think it's important for the community to be informed about what we are doing. And so I don't know if Marisol is there. We were talking earlier today about how the communications department can help us to communicate the work that we're doing on this committee. So if you're there, Marisol, could you chime in to this conversation?
Good evening, Vice President Elliott and
Good
Commissioner.
evening.
I'm happy to be here and help you in any way that you need. So my thought is, if the superintendent and the deputies are going to be reviewing the ESA priorities that you have listed in your brainstorm, then what I can do is develop a communications plan that would go in line with those priorities. and we'll make sure to highlight those achievements as we move along, because those are important to our district, and I know they're very important to you.
Thank you so much, Marisol. Any other conversation for the ESA, the Equity and Student Achievement Committee, for this evening?
Commissioner Elliott?
Yes.
We skipped over the data reporting schedule.
Oh, shoot, I'm sorry. So I meant to do that. So I'm going to let, is it Dr. Morris that can talk about this form? Or is it you, Rahima?
I can speak to the form.
Okay.
So let me just share my screen so everyone can see it.
And thank you for reminding me of that. I'm sorry about that.
No problem. So from our preview meeting, we had a discussion around data deliverables. And so this form that you see is a form that the policy committee uses to track the policy deliverables. And so the thought would be to have the data committee, ESA use the similar form so that we can track the data deliverables coming from the academic, what's the word I'm looking for? From your priorities, from the strategic plan. And so this would be used in a similar fashion where commissioners could request data and provide details around how they would like it delineated and then any other deadlines that are necessary to track in that form.
This is sort of like the question log, isn't it, Rahima?
It sounds like the question log. I'm a little confused at this, Rahima, in that, because we have some reporting structures. I'm going to ask Dr. Morris to come back on screen. Did you develop this, Janelle?
No, so if I could jump in,
Okay.
Dr. Myers Small. So if you recall, the policy committee does use it to track whenever there is a policy deliverable. Last time in the ESA brainstorm, the commissioners talked about the fact that they would like to make sure that reports are going through the ESA committee. And so things like the graduation rates, things like suspension data, things like ELA and math scores, things like that. If there is a request for data to be presented, this is one way that we can track it being added to an ESA agenda. So it's not really like the question log. The question log is really for just board questions. But for example, this would help us plan out the rest of the academic year in ESA. Right now, currently, there are about 6 more meetings on the agenda, and we would be able to plot out when each data deliverable would be received by the board. I think that currently it probably makes the most sense to also, since we're taking the other document offline, that we also take a look at this, because a lot of these, I believe, will be tied to when the information becomes available. So we have to know from administration when that would be possible to add to this form.
Yeah, one of the things I just wanted to add is that we talked about, based on what you saw, what the commissioners saw with their strategic plans of looking at a potential schedule of things that we could update. So I would want to make sure we circle back to make sure we're not bumping heads and that we have some alignment and some congruence. So respectfully, I'd ask that if we could circle back with Dr. Morris and you can see what that looks like, that might change, that might impact this. When you agree?
And I do think so. I think also that is something that Rahima and Vice President Elliott were talking about, that it needs to be aligned to the strategic.
Yeah.
But this is one way that we can move forward with planning the ESA committee, is that we will know in March, we'll do, graduation rate data, or in February, we will do suspension data or such, based on the priorities that are delineated in the strategic plan.
Okay.
Thank you. A couple of other things. One is I should have done this from the top. We have, as a parent rep, Yvonne Klingscale. Yvonne has been a parent rep or community rep on our Community and Intergovernmental Relations Committee. When I chaired that committee, Yvonne, Ms. Klingscale is involved with have been working with youth for over 30 years. She now currently works for, well, has been working for In Control for, I think, about 25 years, and has a lot of insight when it comes to working with our young people. And so I am very excited to have her voice lent to our discussion around equity and student achievement. So I don't know if she's still on, but if she'd like to share a few words, I'd love to have her to do that at this time. Is she still?
Yes, Cynthia, I'm on.
All
Can y'all
right.
hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, everybody. I've actually been listening for the last 3 hours, and not once, and please y'all don't think I'm crash, but not once did I hear anything about our students. And for me, as a parent who took three kids through the district, 2 with special education, 1 that was successful, 1 that was not. I understand systems, I understand data, but for me as a parent, I need y'all to focus on our kids. Right now, I work for In Control, which is a teen pregnancy prevention program. And in support of the district, we are actually running a COVID learning lab with a sampling of students. So I think that, yeah, it's important for data, but we can't achieve data if we're not focusing on our students. I've been on, I mean, I actually logged in at 5:30. I didn't get in until maybe about 6 o'clock. So I've been on here listening to everybody. And I think that we need to redirect data and focus on students. Our students have needs. I've listened to all of y'all. We are in a position as our district to restructure, to reimagine how our school system works. We have enough data to understand that we are lacking when it comes to our Black African-American males. Most of them don't connect to our district. You talk about alternative learning. Yeah, we need to go back to vocational training. Every kid is not gonna wanna go to college. So we need to think about, okay, let's focus on creating a part of our education for those that are excited about going to college. Well, let's think about those that don't. And we have more that don't than do. Especially when we talk about our district. I've been with our district for about the last 15 years. I worked in Douglas, I worked in leadership, I worked in early college, I worked in your ROTC program. Y'all, and what y'all's focusing on with all these systems and the data, we got to get down to the ground level. I've been on the ground level for 32 years, and I love being down there because that's how I learned how to connect with our kids. I don't have no problem. I can walk in a room with 150 kids, and I can connect because I'm down here. Sometimes as politicians or being in the position that you are, you're far removed from the real. We're looking at data. We're not looking at people. And until us as a district begin to look at people, there's not going to be any change. I'm a parent again, I'm going to say that took 3 kids to your district. And right now I got 4 kids, my grandkids in your district now. And 2 of my kids have special needs, my grandkids. Van, Cynthia, y'all know I took y'all to Hope Hall how many years ago?
Yes.
2 years ago. And what did I say? I said, y'all, we need to create a school where we can focus on our kids that have special needs. They don't have to be included with kids who are on track to go to college. They don't think alike. Also, we have so many community programs that's begging to put our kids in their program. There's another program, RCTC, which is Rochester Construction Training. That man, Andy, just won a prize. We went to Douglas begging, give me your kids who are not on track to go to college, and let's give them some vocational training so that they can provide for them and their families. Y'all, we got to rethink how we thinking. It ain't about the state. It's about our kids and our community. And all y'all live in Rochester, and all y'all know our kids are not doing good. So let's take our focus away from data and say, how can we structure our program? And I told Cynthia and Van this 4 or 5 years ago when I sat on the committee. Y'all, we're in an opportunity. We're at the bottom. We can restructure everything. We can come up with something brand new. The state will accept it because we 39%. That's how long I've been dealing with y'all. When we was at that 39% level. Think differently, guys.
Thank you.
Talk to the people on the ground level.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you. And so I hope we all heard what Ms. Klingscale has shared with us. That's from the ground level. And so I hope that that helps to inform our work and that we really do listen to her experience in helping that to inform what we do. And so thank you again. So lastly, I just wanted to make sure that I present again the purpose of the Excellence in Student Achievement, the Equity and Student Achievement Committee. It is to work to advance student achievement. We will review quarterly academic achievement reports. We will review policies and our administration recommendations that impact student achievement. We will oversee program evaluation to ensure funded programs are effectively impacting student achievement and that successful programs are replicated where possible. We will review and recommend positions to the board on resolutions pertaining to student achievement, corresponding policies and programs. We will follow up on implementation of board-approved policies and programs and monitor with the governance committee progress on the board's annual goals. And so that is the purpose of this committee. Let me just also read this last paragraph. I'll read it quickly. This committee will work to perform threading and equity lens through all 7 points of purpose to ensure equitable intent and equitable process and equitable outcome for all students. This includes looking at congruent district initiatives like the MBK grant that is specific to a subgroup of students. This includes Black and Brown males who have deliberately been disproportionate represented in equity work and establishing programs for Black and Brown girls. This committee work will also represent a current resource allocation to look at curriculum, shared decision-making, a pure and autonomous parent constituency right to be at the table. So wanted just to share that. And with that, Mr. President, that unless there's any other questions, that concludes the Equity and Student Achievement Committee. Thank you. Hello.
Thank you, Vice President Elliott. All right, next item on our agenda is, it says consideration of resolutions, but we're going to go into executive session first for the purpose of talking to our general counsel about matters that relate to contracts, I think is how I was told to frame it. And technically, just so folks know, when you speak to your attorney, you don't need to formally go into executive session, but there may be some need to have some ancillary conversation. So what I need right now is a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of receiving counsel from our attorney about contracts. Is there a motion?
Van, quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Don't we need to thank some of our donors?
I was told strategically, I thought I communicated that to you. We're going to do that afterwards for a reason that I'll explain later. And maybe, I don't think I explained it in the email. So we're going to do it after we come out of executive session.
All right, so motion.
All right, there's a motion from Commissioner Malloy. Is there a second? Come on, guys.
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner LeBron. I heard Commissioner LeBron first. To those folks who are watching, you've heard me say it before on behalf of the board, there are certain things we have to discuss confidentially because the law requires it, or circumstances require it. We're going to come back out of executive session. I ask you to stick around if you can, because we are going to vote on some stuff once we come out of executive session. So all those in favor of going into executive session for the purpose of discussing a contractual matter with our general counsel indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? The ayes have it. Again, we'll be back in not that long of a time. Can't guarantee it, but if you can't stick around, on behalf of the board, have a safe and enjoyable night. And I guess we're out. Good evening, everybody. It is 8:40 as I promised. We did have some business to conduct in the open session. I need a motion to advance for discussion of resolutions 438 and 439. Is there a motion? Commissioner LeBron? Commissioner LeBron, motion. Commissioner Adams is seconded. Any questions or comments regarding resolutions 438 and 439?
I do, but I'm gonna let Commissioner Malloy go first.
Are we still doing this, President White?
You know, it is, everybody has the right to say what they want to say, but if Commissioner LeBron wants to address it, why don't you just let her? That's fine. I mean, Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, so I'm not gonna get into the details, but what I will say, and I personally want to thank, is our county legislator woman, Rachel Barnhart. I also want to thank City Councilwoman Mary Lupian. And I also want to thank the Community Foundation, but specifically Simeon Bannister, for really kind of working together to address this and supporting the district in this way. And that's all I want to say, and I wanted it on record. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions or comments regarding resolutions 438 and 439? There being no further questions or comments, all those in favor of resolution 438, 439 indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? I'm certain there is not. So all I need now is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Adams. All those in favor of adjourning indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Survey.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Powell. There you go again, always monitoring. All right, there we go. Thanks. What you got, Natalia? We all set?
I just have, 1 second, I believe Commissioner LeBron has left, so I still need one more.
She left without completing the survey?
I believe so. Okay, I do have my, yes, she did. So without her, I have everyone. Thank you.
No, I'm not done yet.
Okay, take your time.
Commission. So I'm going to need to do, when I do the report on the data, I will need to touch base on this because sometimes when people leave and then additional people take it, it skews up the data. So I'll have to report out on that. But I do have the information. Dr. Jallo, I'll forward that out to you in the morning.
Thank you.
No problem.
Commissioner Powell.
Commissioner Adams, are you finished?
He's, I think he's on mute.
There we go. I got it.
Yes,
I got it.
Okay, so I don't think where you reminded me we didn't take the vote, we didn't do the survey. I think we were about to take the vote to adjourn because there was a motion in a second. All those in favor of adjourning indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, good night, everybody. Have a nice night.
Good night.